As long as we're searching for a one-sided world, a pleasure without a pain, a happy without a sad, a kind without a cruel, it's futile. The maximum fulfillment, maximum fitness is the embracing of the bouquet of all pairs of opposites synchronously.
Do you think life assigns us a mission before we're ever born?
I've studied enough about values to know this, that every time you judge somebody and you put them above you and you're too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you and you disown that part you see, you have a disowned, dismembered, deflected part. And that creates a void of emptiness. You're never going to love yourself if you're trying to get rid of half of yourself.
So how did you understand how everything was so linked to values and how you're living in alignment? Everything you said to me there resonated so deeply with me.
So honor your values, honor their values, learn to communicate what you value in terms of those values, and embrace the two sides of every human being on planet. And you'll be surprised how fulfilled you can become.
If I could drop this mic, I would drop that mic right now. Dr. John Demartini, thank you so much for joining me today. I just want to say before we get started, I've watched hours upon hours of your videos, and I'm extremely resonate with your work and your processes, and I'm very looking forward for everyone else to get to know you a bit more.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. And so just for everyone out there, can you give a brief synopsis about yourself and how you actually even started getting into this work?
Well, I'm an educator. I'm pretty well useless outside of about four things: teaching, researching, writing, and traveling. Everything else is delegated. I only do those four things. So that's where I have a little bit of competence, and the rest of it's I have to delegate to people that know what they're doing. So I've been doing that for 52 years plus. And that's been my dream since I was 17 years old, to travel the world and become a teacher. And anything that can help maximize human awareness potential and help people self-mastery and self-actualize their lives has been my forte and focus. And so I just travel, teach, and research and write every day in that objective.
And you still, you teach self-mastery, right? But do you ever still have moments where you doubt yourself?
Anytime I'm expecting to do something low on my values, yes. So if I expect to solve an IT question, I'm going to doubt myself. In the area of human behavior is where my most certainty is, and where anything lower on my values, that's not really my area of expertise, which I delegate. If I'm momentarily in a situation where I might need to do some of those things, I'll question my skills and my talent.
There would have been a day when you didn't have any of this knowledge or this information base. How did you step into that for the first time and be like, okay, now I'm building up my skills in this area?
Well, I learned very young that you're never in front of an audience that's not resonant with you. They won't show up. So I never really had major concern about that, because it seems like I get the audience that matches where I'm at, what I'm studying, or whatever the questions come in to match it. So it's kind of a resonant, synchronous thing that keeps happening. And as long as I can just say I don't know, but I'll find out. I have a way of finding out anything, so I'm not really stressed by it. I don't have to know it all. If somebody asks me a question, I don't know that, I'll dig it up and find out, or find someone that can give you an answer and give me your contact details, and we'll work with it.
I really resonated when you said that, like it's the resonance of what people are, where they're currently at, because I've found that so much in my life where all of a sudden I'm trying to teach something or trying to talk about something that I have no idea about. And guess what? No one resonates with it because they're also not feeling it at the same time. So you think that's an energetic thing? You think that comes like through something else?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it, like I said, going on 52, almost 53 years. November will be 53. If you start with what you know and let what you know grow, you gradually build incremental momentum towards a body of knowledge that can develop. And then you can always go to the boundary of it, what you know. But once you do that, it's wise to say, I'm speculating and I've got a theory about this, but we don't have knowledge of it yet. So we're working on it. Just be able to be frank about it. Whatever you know, then what's beyond that, the unknown, is always infinite compared to the infinitesimal, what you know. So the more you know, the more humble you get about what you know. You realize, as Socrates said, I'm the most ignorant man on the earth, but they considered him a wise man because he realized that. So, if we look at the geocentric world that once existed in ancient Greece, where the world had these finite stars, these fixed stars in the world, and that there was a boundary, and that we could know pretty well everything inside that, know the Earth eventually. That became obliterated when we got the telescope and realized that the stars that we thought were stars were actually, in some cases, galaxies. And then we started realizing that there's a plethora of galaxies and super galaxy clusters, and it just kept going. So now with the James Webb Telescope, we're now realizing we still don't know the boundaries. We just found a 280 million year old galaxy that's fully formed the other day, fully formed. And we're looking at it as it was, 12.5 billion years ago. No, 13.5 billion years ago.
Yeah. It makes my stresses of life seem very small.
Yeah. So whatever you study, I learned a long time ago, if I study in an area, a particular area, I inevitably get clients that ask questions in whatever I'm studying. And it's almost like there's some sort of a synchronicity that goes on between the student and the teacher. So whatever I'm studying and researching and writing about, I tend to get people asking questions about that, so I can, I guess, confirm what I'm learning. That's the beauty of it.
Have you ever heard of the term laser and lantern? Have you ever heard of that term before?
Laser and lantern?
A laser and a lantern, like two types of individuals in the world. And I really resonated with it because the lasers of the world are the experts in one particular field. They're just really hyper-focused, really bullet-pointed, like a laser pen on a wall. They're just really sharp with it. And the lanterns are the people that sort of spread their light and dip their toes in to many different areas, like I guess a holistic sense, or they're interested in many different areas, but they don't have the sharp knowledge of an expert. Have you heard that before? Anything?
Not under those terms, but that idea of the law of the one and the many has been in my awareness for quite a while, since my early 20s. It's interesting. When I met a teacher when I was 17 years old who inspired me to want to become a teacher, he mentioned universal laws. That sounded really cool, universal law. And so I wanted to know what that was. So I went into the dictionary and I went into the encyclopedias and started looking up what is a universal law. And it referred to natural laws, but eventually it leaned towards the logos. And the logos was the rational order. In the word of the universe, you might say, the rational order, as Newton would call it, the divine master plan of the universe, because the Stoics believed there was some sort of a master plan. So I found myself exploring this thing called the logos. I'm writing a textbook on that right now, in fact. And I made a list of every known discipline in ology that was a fracture of the logos. When you study epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, it's episteme is knowing, and ology is the study of knowing. So the word ology came from logos, and imagine that one individual could know as much as was known at one time, and now people fragment it into specialties, and there's different ologies, which ultimately go back to what is the order to explain the universe, I'd say. Explain the world in the universe, because at one time the world was the center of the universe, they thought. And so this led me to make a list of every known discipline. And then I realized that the average PhD read approximately 100 texts on average to get their first PhD and second PhD on average. So I made it a goal to read 100 texts in every known ology. So I've been blessed to read now 31,000 books in 300 different disciplines to try to find a common thread in all the disciplines, to extract out the logos, you might say, the reason and the language of expression inside every human being, to help people master their lives and maximize their expressions and their self-actualize their life. So that's made me a focus of the one and a polymathic interest and inquiry of the many. So I've got one focus, which is on mastery of life, but I also have everything's related to it. For instance, plants emerged out of a geology. So they came out of it, and animals came out of that, you might say, in the evolutionary scheme from what we can do. And so the study of animals, which is ecology, and plants, and then geology and mineralogy and lithology, I've devoured these things because each of the minerals that are sitting inside the plant, on the planet, are used as coenzymes today. In enzymes, the protein enzymes that emerge eventually, the RNA and the proteins that eventually emerge out of these minerals and catalysts are there. So people go, why would you study lithology? Why would you study mineral composition and rock compositions? I said, because the evolution of the planet and the rocks that were formed on the planet throughout the last 4.6 billion years indicate the metabolic pathways and the minerals that were catalysts in this, and therefore various vitamins, which were nucleic acids and protein based, or amino acid based, and these minerals were the earliest mechanisms for single-celled and multicellular organisms to evolve. So people go, well, so now you're saying you're studying lithology and you're studying mineralogy and geology for the sake of self-actualization? Yep, absolutely. Because I want to know how all the metabolic pathways occurred by oxidation reduction, and that's a planetary phenomenon that's based on the daytime, the air and the sun, and the nighttime and the moisture and the grounding. And these are cycles and chronological cycles that are going on inside the human psyche. We carry all that inside us. We haven't thrown it away. So the evolution of that is very important. So every ology, as far as I'm concerned, is giving me a glimpse of the magnificence that underlies our involvement and our mastery of life.
And what have you found from your findings from looking at these 100 texts? What are some of the things that you've started to come across as the similarities?
In geology, there's an evolution to the planet.
There's an evolution.
And biology, microorganisms, there's an agrobiome of the surface on the soil, but there's also a lithobiome that's sitting inside the rocks, and they're remodeling themselves according to microorganisms. So it's the earth is a living organism. There's a gentleman, Vladimir Vernadsky, who's a Russian scientist that wrote a book called The Biosphere, and he included not just the atmosphere and not just the surface of the earth, but the rocks in the formation, because there's living organisms in there. And we depend on those living organisms for the manufacturing of certain elements and compositions of rocks that we use to build from. And so we wouldn't function without these. I mean, we know now that our body requires microorganisms, and the microbiome is a crucial mechanism for feedback in biological systems for our immune system and our mental function and our physiology. But it's also the earth itself. The atmosphere has microbiome. All the way up to the space station, there's microorganisms. And out at 40,000 feet, we're flying a plane. These are microorganisms living there, living on debris and recycling to the earth. So the study of all that, microbiology, another ology, is crucial for maximizing human potential. And because we're moving in our evolution from living right on the earth to living in higher and higher habitats, flying and eventually space, and it just keeps going. So we're going to have different microbiomes. So the study of that is important for our own evolution. I don't have a discipline that I've studied that doesn't have relevance and reference to the human development process.
So if everything is microbiome, what is it that can affect us and take the microbiome off sort of?
We learn along the way, just like anything else, we learn what works and what doesn't work on a daily basis. And we learn on how to manage the soil. That's an ongoing learning process. We learn how to manage rocks. We go and build our mining things for our mining of various elements. We learn how do we systematically bring that back into balance. So we learn it from trial and error, and we learn also from foresight. We learned inductively and deductively on how to master our environment, because we're going to have to ecopoetically, habitat some other planet someday in evolution. So we're going to have to know how to manage the planet as we go. And we'll have a few glitches along the way, and we'll learn from that. We'll refine it as you go. And it's an ongoing thing. I don't think learning is ever done.
Yeah, for sure. I feel you there. I'd love to hear more about universal law and natural law. This is something that's been coming into my world a lot more, and I'd love to know a little bit more about it.
Well, the universal law, sometimes they're called eponymical laws because they're named after people that discover these principles, these laws. But I think the unity of opposites by Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher in the 6th century, is a very significant one. From the subatomic levels at Planck's dimension, which is 1 times 10 to the negative 33rd centimeters. There's quantum fluctuations due to uncertainty principles, and there's an emergence of particles and nanoparticles, and a submergence and an emergence of photons and light, and a submergent. And it's an ongoing, oscillating, fluctuating environment. And so we can see that that's a pair of opposites, a unity of opposites is emerging. At the atomic level, we have ionization and recombination. At the molecular level, we have SN1 and SN2 and E1 and E2, nuclear substitutions and elimination reactions. At a more complex level, at a cell level, we have mitosis and apoptosis, building and destroying. And inside the cell, there's assemblage and disassemblage of the various subcomponents. So building and destroying in pairs of opposites, anabolic and catabolic behavior is occurring at every scale. Even galaxies emerge, join, become larger, and then sometimes they have collisions. And so there's building and destroying of stars in a normal life cycle of the star. So one thing we know is that there's a transformation, an eternal transformation, and a conservation of space, time, energy, matter, etc. And there's a universal law of the pairs of opposites. I like to think of the unity of opposites as one of the most greatest universal laws. And then we have the law of the one to many. From the one comes the many. From the many comes the one. Radiation, which is electromagnetic radiation, comes from a point source and radiates out to an infinite number of radii. But gravity takes an infinite number of radii and points it back into oneness, towards a singularity. So this law of one and many is the same thing we see in our sociology. We have autocracies and democracies, monarchies, democracies. And inside our relationships with people, when we're dating many, we're wondering and searching for the one. Once we get the one, we're having to keep our eyes off the many. So this law of this one and many, whether it's union or division of people, in-group, out-group bias, whether it's marriage and divorce, where it's friends or enemies, whether it's support or challenge, whether it's oppositions in sports, this law of the one and many is occurring at all scales. So there's certain principles, I guess you could say they're relatively unviolatable laws that nature provides and the universe provides. And then there's human laws, which are unlivable. Most of them are moral hypocrisies, and they're attempts to align with a universal law. But most of the time, our own subjective bias and our amygdala distorts that, and we create artificial laws only to be humbled by them and eventually find that we're hypocrites trying to live them. So I'd rather study the laws of the universe, the ones that nobody violates, and build a composition of life around that, build a foundation of learning around that. That's been my main focus, because it stands way more than just transient trivial. As Michael Montaigne, the skeptical philosopher from France, he traveled over the world trying to find a universal value system to create a morality that would be an ought, not just an is for each individual. And he found that was a pointless thing, because somewhere in the world at any space and time, opposite beliefs were going on. So he had to find out that there was a unity of opposites. We call it now the law of heuristic escalation, because we know that law applies anytime you have an ideologue that produces an ideology, an equal and opposite ideology and ideologue emerge to counterbalance it. As we're seeing right now in America with Trump and trying to control the group, the more order you try to produce in chaos theory, the more chaos you create. And the more chaos that comes around, the more order they try to produce. And these pairs of opposites and unity of one and many, because when you look for order, you're trying to find the universal law in the center of it. And if you're trying to look at chaos, you're trying to disperse it. These laws they're pretty solid laws.
How can we use some of these universal laws or teachings into self-mastery for ourselves, for our daily life?
Well, let's say you meet somebody and you are impulsively attracted to them and a bit infatuated with them, and you're conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides. So you have an attraction to them. We call it infatuation, possibly. When we do, we're assuming there's more positives and negatives. It's not true, because if we stay with them for days, weeks, months, or years, we find out they have the other side. But we were blinded by a subjective bias, a survival strategy of that adrenaline that makes us think that this is a prey and we want to capture it. So we end up blinding ourselves to the downsides. And then we find out that, by God, they had the downsides, and we could have seen them right up right up front if we were asked the right questions and held ourselves accountable to the universal laws, because there's no one-sided thing out there. You can't get a magnet that has a positive pole without a negative pole. It just doesn't occur. But you are fooled into thinking you can, therefore you seek it. But you can also resent somebody, be conscious of the downsides and unconscious the upsides, and now repel from them and reject them. And again, you may find out a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years later that the person you rejected turned out to be somebody that was a great contribution to your life, and now you say thank you. So why not have the wisdom of the ages without the aging process by asking quality questions? The reason we're not seeing the whole picture is because we're unconscious a portion of it. And the quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions we ask. And if we ask amazing questions, we become more conscious of more wholeness that's there. And the wholeness is the essence of the universal law. The partness is the human frailties of perception that we get trapped in.
John, you're going to know what my next question is what are the questions that can help us to?
Well, it depends on the situation, but if you're infatuated with somebody, the question that I ask is, what specific trait, action, or inaction do you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that you are liking, admiring, or attracted to most? And itemize it down so it's not vague and general. And once you identify it, then you go and ask the question, all right, me, talk to myself now, go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait that you admire most. If you look carefully, you'll find out that whatever you project into others and admire, you have already in your life, but you're too humble to admit it, and you've already done it, but you don't want to admit it. So once you actually identify where you did it and level the playing field, you then become aware that you do the same thing. In Romans 2:1 in the New Testament, it said, beware of judging another person, because whatever you judge, you do the same thing. And there's truth in that. I've done that in about 150,000 people. I've done that exercise on, and they have it. The same thing if you resent somebody. You're blind to the downside. So you now go and find out where you do the same thing. Where do you do the things that you're resenting in them that you're ashamed of in you? When you're ashamed, you dissociate with the amygdala, dissociate and go into pride to compensate for it. So you're too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you. So then what you have is you got a disowned part. And each of these disowned parts leave you feeling empty, because when you judge, you feel empty. And these disowned parts and empty feelings are voids that drive our values to try to fulfill what it is that we feel empty by. And all of our judgments empty us, and all of our love fulfills us. So we learn to love by seeing both sides simultaneously and having pure reflective awareness and realizing that what we see in them is inside us. And then we realize once we see this trait that we dislike or admire, now we go and ask, so what's the downside of the trait we admire? In that moment, they're displaying it. What's the upside of the trait? And how does it help us or hinder us in each of the areas of our life until it's neutral? It's neither positive nor negative. There are no positive negative traits out there. You've just been hoodwinked into it by moral hypocrisies still throughout the centuries with conventions and traditions and mores and religious dogma that this is a good or bad thing. But ultimately, if it's here on the planet, it serves, or it would have gone extinct. It wouldn't be here. So if you look carefully, the question is do you have a broad enough and wide enough awareness to be able to see the perfection of what's there, the mastery of there? And that's how you self-actualize your life, because otherwise you're not judging it. And when you're not judging it, you don't have emptiness. You have fulfillment. As the Gnostics called it, they called it pleroma, fullness.
So if I'm attracted to the shadow or the humbleness that's already inside me with someone I'm attracted to, is that right? I've heard the part of you. I've heard the part that we resist or triggers us or we resist is within inside us, but I've never heard of it being the opposite of that, where it's.
Well, if you're resentful to somebody, the only reason you resent them is because they're reminding you of what you already have and already do and already have done that you feel ashamed of. But you dissociate, your amygdala dissociates from shame and goes into pride to compensate for it and goes into defense. So you're pointing your finger at them, but you got three pointing back at you. You've done the same thing, but you're too proud to admit it. And as long as you're too proud to admit it, you got a disowned part and you've disempowered yourself. So it's about looking carefully and honoring the truth that what you see in them is you. And it's a projection. It's a self-reflective universe.
So are there any questions particularly that you would ask someone if that could inquire into those things that they're not looking at, if someone is resisting something or someone?
Yeah, just be honest about it and dig until you find it. It's there. I mean, I've taken, like I said, 150,000 people through the breakthrough experience. And every week, people starting judging somebody for something. And they think it's out there. And every week they discover it was an illusion of their own projection. and that what they judge is them. You only judge things on the outside that represent parts of you haven't loved on the inside. When you get them, both the admired and the despised on the outside are nothing but projections of what you have been too humble or too proud to admit you have. Once you honor it and own it, you get to have fulfillment in life. Because you got to be a hero and a villain to master your life. People think they want to get rid of half of their life to love themselves, but that'll never happen. You can't get rid of your villain and trying to be a hero if you want to love yourself. You got to own your hero and villain. You're kind and cruel. You're nice and mean. You know, it's interesting.
Own our hero and villain.
Yeah, I'm not a nice person. I'm not a mean person. I'm an individual with a set of values. You support my values, I'll be nice as a pussycat. You challenge my values, I'll be mean as a tiger. I'm a human being with both sides. I don't need to get rid of any part of that. I need both sides to fulfill my life. And we go around and we think we're supposed to get rid of something. And that becomes moral hypocritical. Nobody can do it. I ask people, name something you've been trying to get rid of in your life. Oh, I've been trying to get rid of anger or negativity or whatever. Have you gotten rid of it? No, you never will.
For me, it's procrastination.
But you're going to procrastinate. You're designed to procrastinate on low priority things.
On low priority things. So things that are not aligned with my values.
Yeah, anytime I expect myself to do something that's not really high in my values, I'm designed to self-depreciate, designed to procrastinate, hesitate, frustrate. I'm designed to devalue myself because it's not me. Your hierarchy of values dictates your destiny, determines how you perceive, decide, and act. And whatever's highest on your value, your ontological identity revolves around. So if you identify what's really highest in value, what's truly demonstrated in life is most important, and you stick to that, you won't have these symptoms. But if you try to waver from that, and what makes you waver is meeting somebody that you envy and try to imitate and try to live like and inject the values of, and then you're trying to be somebody you're not. And the magnificence of who you truly are is far greater than any fantasy you keep imposing on yourself. And you're designed to procrastinate. I would procrastinate if I was trying to do cooking. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I haven't driven a car in 35 years. Anything that's low in my values, I'll hire specialists to have it high in their values so they get to do what they love and I get to go do what I love. That's the mastery of life.
How do we pinpoint my highest value? If we were going to do it with me right now, what would you do there, John?
I would look at what your life demonstrates. I'd look at how you fill your space. I'd look at where you spend the most time, look at what the personal space and intimate space is there, which is within 4 feet to 1.5 feet of you, and look at what are the most dominant items you keep there and what's the primary use of those items, the utility of those items. That tells me what you're doing. In my case, it's a computer. I'm sitting in front of a computer 18 inches away, typing and reading and looking and engaged in. So that's a very important item. So I look at what's important, and then I look at what's the dominant use. Well, it's for teaching. I'm teaching right now. So if I look at what that is, that gives me an indication. So I look at what are the top 3 things that I fill my most intimate and personal space with, and what is what are those items, and what's the dominant use of them, and they'll be an indication of what your values are right there. The second indicator of values is how you spend your time. You find time, make time, spend time on things that are really, really, really important to you. You don't have time and don't want to take time and run out of time for things that aren't. I always have time for teaching. Always have time for research and writing. But I don't have time for cooking and stuff. That's why I have cooks that take care of, great cooks that take care of my food. And I have drivers take care of that. And I got pilots take care of that. And I got captains from the ship. I don't do things low in value because they devalue you and makes you scatter yourself and then you depreciate yourself. And when you do, the world does. So I just basically stick to my core competencies with things that I can't wait to get up in the morning and do so I can tap dance to work on it. So the second is time. The third one is energy. Your energy is infinite once you recognize the source, and the source is an expression of your highest value. When you're doing your highest value, you're on track. I just came from having lunch with a lovely man who is one of the greatest painters in the world. He's like the Salvador Dali of today. And it's interesting. He's 91. This is him here. His name is Charles Billich, and that's his wife, Krista.
Yeah. Wow.
He's 91, and he paints. He has to be taken away from his mirror, his easel, because he'll paint all day long, all day. His wife has to say, time to eat, time to go do this, time to do that, because he just paints. He's a prolific painter. His paintings are all over the world. He's like a Salvador Dali. And so he's right here in Sydney. And it's really quite interesting. So here's a guy that's really knows his space, knows his time, is filled with energy, 91 years old and still cranking, still puts in a full day, sometimes all day long. And I found the same thing from one of the greatest pianists in the world. I mean, he did 13 hours a day performing piano every single day since he was age 3, and he's 82 now. So people that are really clear about what their values are and stick to it, their energies are high, and people that have high energy are congruent, unless they're doing drugs, and that's not sustainable, which is foolish, actually. The next one is money. You make money, find money, spend money on things that are valuable to you. Look at how you've dispersed your money. If you have a high value on your house, well, then most of your money go to a house. If you have a high value in travel, you'll travel. High value in learning, you'll go to educational classes. High value in wealth building, you'll put money into assets. Well, high value on your business, you'll put money into your business. Your money goes where your thoughts flow. Mm. So your innermost dominant thought is an expression of what you value most. So you take those 4, space, time, energy, and money. Those are the first 4. Then you look at where you most organize and ordered. Then you look at where you're most disciplined and reliable. Then you look at what you think about, visualize, affirm about how you would love your life to be that is showing evidence of coming true. Because you walk your talk in your highest values, you limp your life in the lowest. Then you look at what you want to bring conversations to when you're in social setting. What do you want to talk about mostly? The most consistent conversation topic. Then you look at what inspires you and brings tears to your eyes when you get to do it, which are confirmations of authenticity. Then you look at what it is that you actually have as the most consistent, persistent goals that you've had that are coming true, long-term goals. And the last one is, what do you spontaneously want to read about, learn about, study, and watch on YouTube? If you take those 13 value determinants, answer 3 answers to each, look at what are the answers, they'll reiterate themselves, they'll demonstrate a pattern, and you'll see what your life is demonstrating. It's not what you fantasy, it's not what you wish it would be, it's not what you hope it will be, it's not what it used to be, it's what it is today, right now, in your life's demonstration. That tells me what you value most.
Wow. And how do you take people through that?
Well, believe it or not, whoever may be listening, they go to drdemartini.com, and there's a free, complimentary, guided 30-minute process they can do for free. It's open to the public. Millions of people use it.
And how did you come across this? How did you understand how everything was so linked to values and how you're living in alignment? Everything you said to me there resonated so deeply with me. Like, I've never actually had an episode where I'm talking to someone where I'm nodding so much that I feel like this must be off-putting for John listening to me, because I'm sitting here nodding because I'm just resonating with what you're saying so much. How did you come across values? Where did that step into in your life? What was not going right for you then?
Well, I can't say that anything was not going right. I was asking a question at age 23. Why do some people walk their talk, some people limp their life? Because I wanted to work on self-mastery since I was 18. 17, I wanted to be a teacher. 18, I wanted to self-mastery. So I asked, what is it that makes people walk their talk, and why do some people limp their life? That led me to the study of drive and motivation and drive. And that led me to studying of human values. Values are things that are valuable, and the hierarchy of values is going to dictate what you're probable doing and what you're non-probably doing. So the hierarchy of your values is based on a statistical probability game. Whatever's highest, you have the highest probability of doing. Whatever's lowest, you have the lowest probability of doing. You take a child who has a high value on doing his video games, he'll do it every day without need to be reminded. He'll spontaneously act. What's interesting is when you're doing whatever is highest on your value, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain, into the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, and literally causes spontaneous action potentials, non-evoked ones, but spontaneous action potentials, and create gamma synchronicities in the brain and synchronizes a gestalt experience in the brain. And it gives you a tear of aha and a eureka moment that lets you know you're authentic. You're now living congruently. You're now being yourself. And everybody knows this state when they get the tear of inspiration. They know to follow this. They know there's something meaningful to grab it. And that's a confirmation. That's your physiological brain doing its job to try to let you know you're on track. And anytime you get away from that, you're going to get pushed back to that. So I asked, what is it that makes people, walk their talk versus limp their life? And I found out the hierarchy of values was the most significant thing. So that led me to axiology, which is a study of value and worth. I read the only 12 books that were in existence on the topic in English at the time, including that. Was not satisfied with any of the different value determination systems they had. Most of them were impacted by David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, that was about ought, not is. And I'm not interested in what it ought to be in society. I'm interested in what it actually is in a human being. Because what we ought to be, which is a moral hypocrisy, and what we actually are, two different things. Society wants you to conform and fit in, but you're living in a world that what you want to be yourself, in a world that doesn't want you to be yourself. So the oughts are automatically going to suppress and repress the expression of your genius. I want to know what it is. So that I had to develop it, and so I did develop that. Those things I mentioned are ones I developed starting at age 23. I looked for what would be the most intrinsic demonstrations of human behavior that drives people. And it's a gold mine if you get it and you master it and learn it, and then structure your life around it. That's the mastery of life, is basically learning how to prioritize things. And
so from doing this for so long, I bet you can see when you're first talking to someone that's living in values or someone that isn't.
Yes, it's not hard to see. I was doing a value determination process. I've done it on thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Sure.
And I've only found a 99% congruent person once. I mean, this was a lady in Israel who was a very influential woman in the country and reaches millions of people in her outreach and impact, and was very congruent, extremely congruent lady. Now, I've seen 97ers, I've seen 95ers, but as you go down the scale of society, you get less and less of that. You get incongruencies as you go down. And that's why they live by duty. We either have ontology, which is the living by a design, you might say, and being ourself. Ontology is the study of being and becoming. And people that are being themselves live by design. And people that are not being themselves live by duty. They're constantly subordinating to outer authorities. They're not a leader of their own life. They subordinate to, as a superego that Freud described, their outer authorities, and then they inject them, and then they live by duty, trying to fit in and trying to please people instead of actually serve people. There's a difference between pleasing and serving. Serving is doing something that inspires you and taking your gift and great creative genius out into the world and doing it in a way that serves other people and meets their needs. Subordinating to them is sacrificing yourself at the expense of living by obedience. And we see sometimes in religious dogma, we see this obedience, and it suppresses people, and it doesn't create genius. I'm interested in self-actualization, not subordination.
So when it comes to something like imposter syndrome now after hearing everything you've spoken about, is someone that's not living in their values.
That's it. If you're living by your highest values, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain. You have the most reasoning and the most objectivity and the most balanced view, and you're more holistic. And when you're not, and you're trying to live by lower values, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the subcortical amygdala and the hippocampus. And now you're going to be in a survival mode, and you're going to be subjectively biasing things and distorting things and having more prejudice and more racism, if you will, and you're going to be an imposter. And the reason why you're an imposter, believe it or not, goes all the way back. I was studying cephalopods, octopus, and they're great at camouflage. And right, if they see a prey, they can turn themselves into sand or seaweed or coral. And they can make themselves mix in so that the prey doesn't see them or the predator doesn't see them. So we camouflage as a cephalopod, as an octopus, we camouflage to not let our prey see us so we can capture prey, and not let our predator see us so we can escape predator. So we automatically use camouflage in our life in the form of imposter syndromes, because whenever we meet somebody that we're infatuated with, they represent prey. Whenever we meet somebody that we resent, they represent predator. And so we put on different facades, nice or mean, humble or proud, right? Personas, imposter syndromes, whenever we judge people and don't have a perfect reflective awareness. So anytime we put people on pedestals or pits, and anytime we minimize and exaggerate ourselves in compensation by the law of contrast, we automatically create the imposter syndrome. And most of our life is the imposter syndrome.
Wow. I like to take a moment just to let that absorb into my body while you say that. And do you think then purpose is created through value? Through your values then? Because if you're living in your values, I guess that's going to come with your purpose. It's such a big thing you hear people talk about, finding your purpose, find your purpose, and then you're the holy grail of happiness. But what I'm hearing from you is really that comes through finding your true values in life and not living in your bottom values.
Well, let's just shatter something like that. Anybody that's pursuing happiness is, in my opinion, is missing the boat. The distinction between us and the animals is our ability to find meaning, as Viktor Frankl said. Nietzsche said to empower ourselves, and Freud said the pleasure principle. But the pleasure principle of hedonism there's a thing called a hedonic adaptation to guarantees we return back to a set point so we don't stay happy. So pursuing happiness is futile. It's a waste of time. I gave that up 41 years ago. But extracting meaning out of our experience. Now, as Camus says, there's no meaning in the universe except what we give it. But we give it meaning based on the projection of our values. And so if we live by our highest values, we live by what is called the telos, the end in mind, according to Aristotle. And that telos is what gave rise to teleology, which is the study of meaning and purpose. So the most important thing, the most inspiring thing, the most fulfilling thing, the most meaningful thing, the most purposeful thing a human being can do is to live congruently in alignment with what they value most. So identifying that is why I have it on the website for free for people around the world. Because I want them to at least start there, because that's the place to start for knowing yourself, being yourself, and loving yourself. But going after, the pursuit of happiness is an amygdala-driven mechanism to avoid pain and seek pleasure, to avoid sadness and seek it. But the very pursuit of that, because it's unobtainable, is the source of our sadness. Our depressions are basically compensations for unfulfilled highest values, and they're basically the pursuit of fantasies. So the Buddha said very clearly that the desire for that which is unobtainable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is the source of human suffering. So as long as we're searching for a one-sided world, a pleasure without a pain, a happy without a sad, a kind without a cruel, a good without an evil, any of those, a peace without a war, it's futile. It's absolute futility. That's like trying to get a prey without a predator. Not going to happen. If you get prey without predator, you become fat and gluttonous and you lose fitness. If you get predator without prey, you get emaciated and starved and lose fitness. If you put prey and predator together, support and challenge, positive and negatives together, you get maximum fitness. It's known by the unity of opposites that the maximum fulfillment, maximum fitness, is the embracing of the bouquet of all pairs of opposites synchronously. That's the path. And it's our highest value that allows us to do it, and only our highest value that allows us to do it, the telos. That's why it was the end in mind. That where the mind ended, the soul awakened.
Beautiful. And after we've found our values and we've really started to ingrain that into our being, what happens? What's the next stage? Is there another stage for that for you?
You won't self-actualize unless you delegate. And if you don't delegate wisely to people who would absolutely love to do what you want to delegate, then you'll end up micromanaging and you'll be distracting. So it's the art of delegating is the key to self-actualization. If you're trying to do it all yourself, there's no way you can be staying on priority.
So finding people that have values or that at least know their values, I'm sure you'll know because they have more energy from it. They spend a lot of their time doing it. They're very good at it. They
spontaneously love doing what you want to delegate.
Yes. I have people in my team like that are just good at stuff that I'm terrible at. Organization.
Yeah. To do what you love doing, that's the key. So I delegate everything. I tell my girlfriend, I said, listen, I'm not the greatest in lovemaking. It's not my highest value. So I'm going to have George Clooney take care of that for you. And so she says, if you do that, I'll still love you. And I said, good. She loves me as long as George is there. She loves me.
Now I want to come on your ship and see what that party's about. So you've been living in you said this at the beginning before we went on air. Like, what was you've been living on a ship for the last 20 odd years, right? It'll
be 24 years. I bought in October, 2 weeks after 9/11. Just a little over 2 weeks.
What made you decide to do that?
I was reading the Robb Report, and I saw an advertisement for a condominium ship, and I thought that matches me because I've always said the universe is my playground, the world is my home, every country's a room in the house, every city's a platform to share my heart and soul. And I'm a gypsy kind of guy, right? I travel all the time. I've done about 21 million miles in flying and about 2 million miles in sailing. So I really resonate with that. And then, but it was only 27% occupied at the time. So I thought, well, that's a bit risky. I better investigate it better. And then 9/11 occurred, and we were living in Trump Tower at the time, my wife and I, and they shut down the building, and because they thought that might be next, target. So my wife said, I'm ready to get out of New York temporarily. Now we had homes in Australia at the time, so we were out on the Gold Coast. We had a place out there in the Gold Coast. Yep. Well, we had we had Liberty. We had a bunch of apartments. We bought a bunch of condominiums years ago. But
Beautiful.
we had a one at Liberty Panorama and Liberty Pacifica. So we had a beautiful place there. And so she went out there, and then she went out to the Golden Door, which was a spa out there, and just kind of relaxed after 9/11. And then I thought, well, I'm not scheduled to be speaking here. I usually come to Australia 4 or 5 times a year. I wasn't going to be scheduled here for another 4 months. I wasn't going to see my wife. She was going to hang out there. So I thought we need to come up with plan B. And so sort of for an anniversary present, even an early one, I got the ship. And so I've been living on there ever since.
Yeah. So I'm guessing one of your highest values is travel.
Travel is number 4. Well, it's actually number 3. Teaching, researching and writing, traveling are the top ones. That's it. I'm outside that, I'm pretty useless, but I'm pretty good at those.
Yeah. I've got a couple of out there questions for you, which I'd love to hear your take on them as well. Do you think life assigns us a mission before we're ever born, before we're even born?
Well, that's a good question. That's something nobody can really ever answer is because there's too many variables to be able to ever confirm that. We can believe what we want, but I don't know if we can answer that. But I do know that I've studied enough about values to know this, that every time you judge somebody and you put them above you and you're too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you and you disown that part you see, you have a disowned, dismembered, deflected part. And that creates a void of emptiness. You feel incomplete. And every time you put somebody up in the pit and you exaggerate yourself and puff yourself up with pride, and you're too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you, you have disowned, deflected, dismembered parts now. And again, a void. So anytime you judge another human being, you create voids. And these voids that leave you feeling empty want to be fulfilled. And so your highest value, which is most objective and neutral, the neutralization of the judgment is what fulfills the emptiness. So the highest value, the telos, is the key to your purpose. And your purpose is the most efficient and effective pathway to fulfill the greatest amount of voids from all the judgments you've accumulated with the greatest amount of value, which is fulfillment. And I've been just studying that, watching that, and I'm pretty solid about that. That's a pretty strong certainty. So I can take anybody's history and look at all the voids and judgments they have and show them the correlation of what their innermost dominant thought and their direction and focus is and help them emerge their purpose in life. That purpose is based on their experiences. And it can vary because you can change your experiences. If I go back and help you transform your perception of what happened in your childhood, I can change the voids in your life in the direction of your values change. And we do that every week in my program, the Breakthrough Experience. So the hierarchy of your values is determined by the hierarchy of your voids. And your voids are not set in stone. They're historical. They're stored in the subconscious mind and the hippocampus, as episodic memories. But all of those can be redrawn and restructured by asking quality questions and becoming conscious of what you were unconscious of during those experiences.
Do you have any examples of changing the perception of something happened to someone in childhood and then watching them?
Yeah. About 80 of them popped in my head as you said that. I think of a lady in Florida, 2020. Let's see, this would have been 2022, 23, just 2 years ago. She comes to the Breakthrough Experience. It was her signature program I present on how to break through limitations and obstacles and stuff. And she comes there and she wants to brag about how she's an abandoned child. She's a victim of history, not a master of destiny. And she's wanting to run her story and have people sympathize with her because she was an abandoned child. And the reason why her life is all messed up is because her mom didn't want her. That's the story she was running. And I've been doing this a long time, and I know those are all bullshit stories. And so I said, great. So let's write down what specifically did you think that your mom did not provide you or do for you? And first it was generic. Well, she didn't do anything for me. She was not there. She left me. I said, I know. Just answer the question. What do you think you missed out on? And we itemized it down to 6 or 7, I think 7 different items. Didn't give me instruction and guide me, didn't hug me and to give me attention, that kind of thing. I said, good. Now that we know what you think you're missing, who provided it? She said, nobody. I said, no, look again. Nothing's missing in your life. At the level of the essence of your authentic self, or what the theologians call the soul, nothing's ever missing. That's where there's fulfillment. But you think there's missing and you're judging like that. You got this emptiness and you're running a story and your therapists are making you run that story so they can collect some money off you. But the reality is, who provided it? Who gave you the affection you were looking for? And I made her accountable, and she stopped and looked, and she goes, my aunt, my mom's sister. Great. Who else? Her mom, my grandmother. Who else? Two of my best friends' moms. Who else? Well, when I got a little older, my teacher, and actually a series of female teachers. I said, now, is the quantity of what you wanted from your mom now demonstrated in those? Do we have enough quantity to account for it? She goes, if I put all those people together, yes, the quantity of what I expect from her was provided. Great. It wasn't missing. It was in a form you didn't know and acknowledge. You overlooked it because you were biased, and you had a fantasy about how your mom's supposed to be. But no, the way the mom is the actual truth about your mom. The way you expected it is your fantasy, and you compare reality to a fantasy, you're going to be depressed and angry. So can you see that they were there and they did? Now, what's the benefit of them providing it? I learned another language. I got to travel more. Yeah, I had a higher standard of life. And she started listening to these things. She got a little teary-eyed. She didn't think about that because, she didn't ask the right question. And then I said, now, if your mom had been there, what would have been the drawback? Because, see, you're holding on to a fantasy. A fantasy is a positive without a negative. So you're holding on to a fantasy. Life would have been happier if my mommy would have been there. What would have been the drawback if your mommy were there? And she goes, well, there wouldn't be. I said, no, be accountable. What would be the drawback? Go there. Because no matter who you're with, anybody you date or marry, you're going to find benefits and drawbacks. And if you live with your mommy and she would have been there, you would have had things you liked and disliked. What would have been the drawbacks? And she stopped, and then she got teary-eyed, and she goes, whoa. I said, what is it? She said, something my aunt said to me when I was a little girl that just right now makes sense. I said, what is it? She started crying really deep. She said, the reason why your mom gave you up was not because she didn't want you. Your mom had bipolar condition and was dissociated much of the time and left you in a scalding bath and forgot you. And you almost drowned and died. And your mom came to me and said, my daughter is too important for me to take that risk ever again. Will you please help me raise my beautiful daughter? When she got that, her whole frame of reference changed. She realized there was nothing missing. She realized that there was an affection and love that her mom gave her because she wanted to have a better life than what she could provide. Her mother was single. Her mother didn't have a decent job. She didn't have a decent education. And her life, when she stopped and think about it, was way more blessed than she would have had if she'd been with her mom. And she stopped and realized her mom didn't give her up because of abandonment and rejection, gave her up because of love. And when she got that, her whole demeanor changed. Her whole perception changed. And we went ahead and did all the other parts that she thought was missing. And now she just went right through them and saw who took it on. And now is resourceful and realized that nothing was missing in her life. It was in a form that was more perfect for her than she ever imagined. When she did, she says, I know one thing I'm going to do right now. I'm going to find my mom and I'm going to go and tell her I love you. And she said, I'm going to find her and I'm going to go and I'm going to work on a book on my life. And just in case somebody else is trapped in the same illusion. And she did. So that's the kind of transformation that can occur. It's never what happens to us. It's how we perceive, decide, and act from it. We can be victims of history or masters of destiny based on the questions we ask ourselves, liberate ourselves from the illusions of this emptiness, from all the judgments we have because we're comparing life to moral hypocrisies.
I can't wait for this to be shared with everyone else. I really can't. I want to ask you one more question, John, and then I'll leave you alone. And I'm going to see you tomorrow anyway at your workshop. Is tomorrow's workshop Breakthrough Experience?
No. Tomorrow's workshop is Master Your Perceptions, Master Your Life. The Breakthrough Experience is 25 or 6 hours. It's a weekend experience for people that are daring enough to want to go and actually break through all the bullshit that they're running their lives by.
When are you back in Australia doing that?
I just did one this weekend in Sydney. I'm doing one in Brisbane this week.
Oh, I missed that one.
And then next weekend I'll be in Perth. Then I'll be back here in October.
Okay, cool. I'll have a look for October then. I'll speak to your team. And the last question I wanted to ask was, what's something you believe that most people would probably disagree with?
Most people, the masses, have been indoctrinated so much by the pursuit of monopoles, the pursuit of one-sidedness, thinking they're going to be happy, think there's going to be peace, think there's going to be pleasure, think there's going to be this final end afterlife soul bill of goods. Instead of honoring the magnificence of the pair of opposites and how important support and challenge and peace and war and positive, negative, and pleasure and pain. You know, the Global Peace Index monitors the degree of peace in 99.7% of the world's population. It does it with 23 very significant parameters, and it shows it balanced year after year. But people, politicians, religious people, and fanatics and gurus and stuff like to sell the fantasy as a commercial end to appease to the amygdala's drive to avoid predator and seek prey. And so they stay juvenilely dependent, and then they look for father figures or whatever to try to rescue and save them as heroes. So they join collective herd instinct sports or, gurus or leaders or whatever, trying to find this individual that's the hero that always lets them down. I'm a firm believer in honoring the magnificence of the way it is and embracing both sides of life. You're never going to love yourself if you're trying to get rid of half of yourself. You're not going to love the people that you care about if you're going to try to get rid of half of them. They're not going to live in your values. You're not going to live in their values. You're going to be unique. So honor your values, honor their values, learn to communicate what you value in terms of those values, and embrace the two sides of every human being on planet. And you'll be surprised how fulfilled you can become.
If I could drop this mic, I would drop that mic right now. Absolutely beautiful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. I know how busy you are, and I really, really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, and I'm definitely going to come and do the breakthrough experience for sure. And for anyone else listening, going to your website to go through their own values process and anything else that you'd love to share with anyone.
Yeah, just if they would like to do the value determination, just go on drdemartini.com. And if they'd like to go and learn, the website is an educational website. It's just filled with radio, television, newspapers, magazines, podcasts, information. It's an information website for people. That's been my dream, to be a teacher, and I use every vehicle I can to teach every day.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you for the great interview.